Welcome to the Mix Minus podcast. This is Matthew McQueenie, Greg Hrinya, Examiner.com, NBA, and most notably the Brooklyn Nets, which might be worth watching now. Tim Castano, who covers the NBA and the NFL and pop culture for the Mix Minus podcast network, as well as being the president of New Start, New Jersey. Gentlemen, how are we?
Well, thank you.
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
So we are here to talk about... Is the phone going off? I don't think so. No. We are here to talk about NBA free agency, of course, and it might be more momentous than our last few conversations. Although we had a great one last year when, on the day, Greg, that Deron Williams was bought out from the Nets.
Yes, yeah, it was a couple hours.
That day it was like perfect.
Yeah.
And it's always funny with Deron Williams. It feels like it's dog years, doesn't it? Doesn't everything Deron Williams, everything he had to do with the Nets feels like 1 year is 3.
Yeah, it feels like it's been a long time, and also I think with him recently signing in Dallas, everyone keeps looking at what he was in Utah, thinking that he's going to recapture that form. And Nets fans, I think, even at the end, were still thinking, "Oh, if he can just stay here one more year," I think a lot of them were still hopeful. And then when he left, it's like the realization, that he wasn't as good as we all thought.
Weren't there 2 Germanys when Deron Williams was in Utah? It feels that long ago.
It does. Everything was so long ago. He wasn't even with the Nets for that long.
No, he really wasn't.
I mean, it's absolutely amazing. And we're not here to talk about Deron Williams. We could do a whole one if we want, but we did that last year. The really interesting thing with Deron Williams, he was bought out by the Nets for like $27.5 million.
Yep.
I believe he had 43 coming to him if he had not gotten bought out. So he gave up $15.5 million. He signed for a $11 million 2-year contract last year. So he got 5.5. And then he opted out of that and got $10 million this week. So he's made whole right back, and he's continuing to get paid. I think they're smoothing out over the years what was owed to him by the Nets.
Yep.
So in many ways, he's getting paid like a max player the whole time. And it brings up an interesting point with smoothing, because the NBA did not smooth out their cap, which momentously jumped up about $24 million this year. And it's going to jump up. It was supposed to be maybe 17, but it looks like it got dropped back a little bit by 5. So it might be like up 12 million next year, as opposed to allow it to slowly come to pass. And what we saw happen because of that is Mr. Kevin Durant, who, Tim, we keep saying Kevin Garnett.
I know.
It's very hard. I said it in my own little podcast I did. Kevin Durant was able to sign with the Golden State Warriors for a host of reasons, but many of them point to this larger cap happening at once. I've almost thought about this as like a trust fund kid, and they get the whole thing at 18, and then they do Johnny Manziel things, as opposed to getting almost an annuity of the trust fund as time goes on. And so kind of crazy, undisciplined things happen. Now, I'm not saying what happened with Golden State was undisciplined. They did a lot of good stuff to make this come to fruition. It wasn't a done deal that he's necessarily going there, even though Adrian Wojnarowski was reporting that in the middle of the season, and they really made him feel loved, and they got him. But where do we kind of stand? I'll start with you, Tim, Mr. Economics. Where do we kind of stand on the way the cap shifted like this? As a fan, do you feel like... do you feel robbed, like, of how cheap it almost made this whole thing? Well, cheap is not the word. Expensive it made this whole thing where crazy contracts are getting thrown around. Or do you kind of feel like, hey, they wanted it this way, the players wanted it this way, the NBA allowed it, just come what may?
A little bit more the latter than the former. Historically speaking, you do think that like Timothy Mozgov made more in one day than Bill Russell, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and Wilt Chamberlain combined over the course of their careers, and that kind of puts things in perspective for you. I almost feel like we're over that a little bit. That was a conversation we were having 20 years ago and kept having, but it's kind of quieted down a little bit. So we've come to accept now we have other leagues talking about the NBA and as opposed to former NBA players talking about the salary explosion. It is what it is. We knew we were headed here, so it wasn't a surprise. We've been talking about it for about 2 or 3 seasons, that this was going to be a summer where we were going to see this massive increase. So front offices prepared for it, players prepared for it. It doesn't ruin anything for me in and of itself, a couple of the moves, I think, have affected the competitive balance of the league in a way that is detrimental. But I don't think that's because the system is necessarily flawed so much as certain teams were better positioned to take advantage of it than others. So it doesn't. The concern was always years ago. I think Charles Barkley said we're going to kill the golden goose, but that was before there was a rookie salary cap, and that was when players like Glenn Robinson was making $80 million when Scottie Pippen was making $25 million. So I think there have been some adjustments over the years that it works. We'll see where it goes from here, but it doesn't offend me. I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with it.
Greg, you're at the arena, at least the home arena, 40 nights a year, basically. Everybody was talking about this happening for years. We knew this was coming, but it almost felt to me like when a hurricane is coming, and we had that with Sandy a couple years ago, where it's coming and you're all prepared for it, and then it comes and it still just completely blows you away. Doesn't it feel like, even though we were prepared for this, that this last couple of weeks has just been like, what the hell just happened?
It's funny because we knew that there was going to be crazy spending, but when you see Timofey Mozgov, 10 minutes into free agency, get a 4-year, $64 million deal, and he played only a couple minutes in the entire finals, and he's relegated basically to the bench, it's like, what is going on here? So, I mean, it's like, that the spending is going to be wild, but you still don't expect, once you see it, you're like, I can't believe that's happening.
Yeah, so, and the Della Vedova in the same respect. Now, they both had larger roles the year before.
And during the season, they had larger roles. It was really just they were kind of limited because going to the shorter bench. I think it's also important to note that you see a lot of NFL players complaining, or like analysts or experts complaining about the rise in the salary. But the reason why all of these guys are making so much money is because the owners are allowing the players to get some of the money. In the NFL, the owners are keeping all the money, whereas the NBA owners decided to invest it back into the league.
Yeah. Do you have
I mean, along those lines, I'm
sorry.
No, I'm sometimes. I'm interested in I would love to see the conversations and the decision making that leads a team to sign a Timothy Moss, to talk themselves into a deal like that, to talk themselves into a Della Vedova, because we knew the money was coming, and we have seen over the years some really stupid decisions made by front offices that they don't learn lessons, and I think that's more surprising than. I guess it's all the scale, but I'm just still surprised that front offices make what appear to be at least short-sighted decisions when it comes to free agency signing that nobody learns.
Doesn't this feel like a bubble, though? I know everyone's saying this is the future, this is where things are going, but I feel more that it's a bubble. It's almost more like when everybody was buying and flipping homes, and they're like, well, the houses are just going to keep going up in price. It's like The Big Short, that when the stripper owns like 5 homes and is leveraging all of them, and it feels more like that, with the money getting thrown around at certain players, a lot of certain players actually, and I think I just have a bad feeling that we're in a bubble mentality right now, especially with the fact that ESPN has been dropping subscribers left and right because a lot of people are cutting their cable, and ESPN had an amazing advantage for years. We're on all of our cable bills, as long as we have it, we're paying a $5 toll to ESPN every month. I mean, it's more than almost any other service. It's not HBO, but HBO we choose to pay for. We're not choosing to pay for ESPN. It's just slapped on our cable bill. And so ESPN thought it was kind of recession proof in a way, because, hey, 100 million households have cable. But now people are starting to go, I don't need cable. And when they start cutting that cord, and it's happening at pretty good levels at this point, and you never know how quick it could even happen as we move ahead. The services online are getting better, and when you have to choose to buy ESPN, which you really can only buy it through the Sling TV app right now, it's not happening. I mean, I remember reading a study that there's maybe at most 20 million people, which is a big number, who really watch ESPN, and it's probably 10 million. So if those people chose to have ESPN, the equivalent of what we're all paying right now would be like $20 to $30 a month for ESPN. And it's not worth that, because it's not our teams. It's sort of an overall package where you get a lot of games. But I think we're going to run up to this. I saw a report today that I was reading today, where by the end of this year, ESPN subscribers could be down to 87 million. So that's 13 million people off of the 100 million number that we're paying that $5 a month. And when that starts to happen, this whole thing could come undone, because who's going to step up and pay the amounts that are covering this jump in $24 million, this jump another $12 million next year? And so that feels like classic bubble to me. Tim?
We'll see. We can think back to, say, 5 years ago, when we looked at some of the values of teams where there were owners trying to unload these teams because they were not profitable. And owning a professional sports team in some ways was like owning a toy. It was just a status symbol, but that changed. Maybe that changed for legitimate or illegitimate reasons with the purchase of the Clippers and the way some of the valuation soared. We'll see. I don't know. I mean, I agree with you. Yes, I think ESPN is shaky, but then I think there are alternative avenues that the NBA can identify to monetize.
Not at these levels, though.
You don't know that, because I think the NBA looks at itself compared to, say, football. The NBA, Major League Baseball is a little bit different, and I think they see the league as being better positioned for the future than the NFL, because it's a game that does have greater appeal beyond the United States, in South America, in Asia. Those are markets that are going to continue to grow. So how can we monetize those markets? And then secondly, it's a game that doesn't have hanging over it the health issues that football does. So, and it's also the players themselves are more socially friendly.
Visible.
They're more visible. They're more plugged into social media.
More everyman. Steph Curry.
Yeah, they seem to be plugged into a lot of the platforms that are engaging. So I think the NBA probably as a league is looking at themselves. Yes, ESPN, that money may fade, but there's going to be ways to make money in other areas, and they think they're probably better positioned to figure that out ahead of the curve as opposed to being on their heels.
Well, you know this Cass Sunstein nudge theory, right?
Yes.
My worry is the $5 that's just been a part of us all having ESPN without kind of realizing it. We are defaulted into that nudge, that 401k. And I think the minute you decouple that and you have to decide to pay, and you're going to have to pay at a much higher rate than even the $5, the choices are going to be much more stark and much more obvious that, hey, maybe I'll just get the NBA package itself. And that's not, I mean, it's pretty expensive, but it's not crazy. And then all of a sudden you're fighting with other sports. It was kind of like when NBA TV came out, then NFL TV comes out, then MLB Network comes out, and each of them are going, oh, we're going to have an amazing network. You know, we're going to have people watching. We're going to have to hire up all these writers. We're going to keep the thing going 24 hours. And then all of a sudden you go, but most people are general interest sports fans and they just want to see the big moment things. I'll just stick with ESPN. And I think Fox Sports is seeing that they tried to buy up all these folks. They tried to bring in the great anchors from Canada to run their version of Sports Center. They've brought in Colin Cowherd. They're bringing in Skip Bayless. They've brought in Jason Whitlock. And the numbers are just really low because the nudge, the opt-in of being with ESPN is just easier to go there. And ESPN is itself struggling with things like Sports Center. And I just wonder if we're now going to be at a point where the choices of having all these things, like you have to decide, oh, I guess I'm all in on this sport. This is all I can afford. And just the choices sometimes might opt you out of even kind of jumping into the situation. I mean, it's a bigger discussion sort of than the NBA thing, but I think it gets to the heart of this being a bubble. And in 3 years, what if that cord cut number is down to 75 million? What if it just continues apace to such a level that, I mean, it's undoing things? I mean, everyone wants to talk about Bill Simmons being out, Colin Cowherd being out of ESPN as these stands they took against people who were fighting the man. But in many ways, they could have just been trying to find ways to shed money, you know, in little ways and just save and not be spitting in the face of the NFL, you know, of MLB, like Colin Cowherd did at the end when he announced he was leaving. I just think this whole sports network, this whole sports television thing is sort of in a tenuous position, and it is the thing buttressing this entire ESPN thing. I mean, I don't know what the split is between ESPN and TBS and TNT or Turner. But I assume ESPN is holding the lion's share of it. And the thing with TNT or with Turner is the NBA is a part of their programming. They have other stuff. ESPN's all in on this. And I do worry about the bubble aspect when you look at the Nets, for instance, who have Alan Crabb. Now these still could get matched, I believe. But
yeah, they could get matched, but based on the dollar numbers that have been thrown out, I mean, if you're Miami, why are you going to pay $50 million for Tyler Johnson, who's hasn't even played a full half season over the last 2 years? And with Alan Crabb, I mean, they're paying him to be a superstar. Basically, he's getting paid $19 million a year. So it's like, you're not going to pay a guy $19 million a year to come off your bench.
Right. And people can say that's the new level, that Crabb and Johnson at 80, he can make upwards of 83, I believe.
Yeah, with
83 million
incentives,
Crabb. And then Johnson, $50 million. The guy started 7 games. I didn't even know who he was.
Yeah,
I watched the
most
NBA
people probably
lot.
haven't heard of him. Yeah.
And I like the idea of going all in on this kind of to a degree, but this is kind of starting to feel like a Las Vegas subdivision in 2008.
Well, one difference though is the duration of the obligations. So that an obligation and salary to a player over 4 to 5 years, in their projections, they can say, yes, we know that based on the current TV deal, we will have money to cover this over 4 to 5 years. If those projections, because of dynamics that you're alluding to, start to soften a little bit, all they do is pull back, and then they're not signing somebody. So this isn't a 30-year obligation, say like a mortgage, to millions upon millions. It's a discrete number of contracts that they're handing out for a shorter period of time. So they can adjust downward. It's not unlike, say, on a micro level, the Yankees, where for years there was no salary cap, there was no amount that they were willing to spend, but then due to a change in philosophy internally, they do draw a line in the sand a little bit. They're starting to pull back. So whereas player X under George Steinbrenner 15 years ago may have gotten a contract worth $55 million over 3 years, just based on the internal changes, no, that player is only going to get $30 million. He's still going to play because no one else is offering him an amount higher than that. So it depends. I don't think the length of the obligations are quite the same that would create a bubble. So the same type of bubble effect as maybe we would find in a different economic construct. Now, I could be wrong. So we could be having I've been wrong about everything that we've talked about over the last 3 months. So next year there could be, the NBA was great while it lasted. We all remember it. Now we don't know what to watch.
It kind of feels like PED baseball. When people are taking the PEDs, the numbers are just kicking off to high levels. Everyone's hitting home runs. Brett Boone's getting, 42 homers. He's got biceps the size of Popeye. And we're all sitting there going, this is kind of fun. It's like being at Vegas, doubling down on the blackjack table. And I just worry what the NBA could be left with when the PED era comes to a close, because the numbers before were pretty high already. I mean, when you're getting $100 million contracts, and I think it hits home what you were saying with the other sports, especially the NFL going, I'm looking at these contracts going around. I forget the NFL player who said it, but I'm looking at these contracts going around and I'm Googling all the names. I don't even know who they are. And I wonder with something like the NFL, where actually is delivering those numbers, if that's another sign of a bubble happening like in real time, where players who are equivalent to these guys are going, yeah, this is even crazy for us.
Well, it was Rich Eisen who I saw on Twitter said that Mike Conley was making $5 million last year. To that, now he's making $30 million. Did he just suddenly become 6 times better overnight?
Right. And like, I also thought maybe the way to have fixed this is such a crazy outlay in one period of time. This is the trust fund kid getting all the money. They should have just allowed all players to opt out. And then at least the market resets itself around the most talented players, and then the rest kind of fall into line, because Tyler Johnson making more than Steph Curry.
Yeah, I know.
Alan Crabb making more than Damian Lillard. I mean, Damian Lillard signed a big deal, I think, actually.
He did, yeah.
But still, he's like equivalent there.
Yeah.
And we were talking about, my worry here is this Travis Outlaw?
Yeah, and I mean, there's a lot of comparisons there. I mean, they were both 6 men basically for Portland, and then the Nets signed them both to be starters. So,
and I watched them both.
Yeah.
And I remember when Travis Outlaw was signed, that was the summer of 2010 when the Nets struck out,
missed out on LeBron,
all of the players.
They got Petro.
They got
did.
Petro.
Yeah.
They got Jordan
They
Farmar.
got Anthony Morrow.
Anthony Morrow. And I remember them getting Travis Outlaw, and I said, "Good, that's a good pickup."
Yeah.
Because I was watching League Pass a lot then, and he always seemed to do something in the fourth quarters. And then he came here, and you go, "Oh."
Yeah.
Now that was a much more moderate contract from what
Sure.
I remember.
Yeah, it
Maybe
was 5
6,
years,
7.
$35 million deals.
Yeah. So I mean,
dollars.
it was pretty crazy, but it wasn't like this. I mean, it's still a lot, but over the years, it's decent. But Alan Crabb, man,
He better be good.
he better be good. And you're just sitting there going, whoa. Now it's interesting for the Nets, but it's also
Yeah, I mean, can we talk a little about Sam Hinkie? I mean, he's been maligned for years, and now it seems he's getting some credit given the direction that the Sixers are in. But I also didn't disagree with him when he didn't spend their money. When they did, I mean, the Sixers, I think they had to spend to reach the minimum at one point. There's nothing wrong with not spending your money for an NBA team. If you know you're not going to get the type of talent that you want to turn your franchise around, why not just sit on it for a year? So that's something that does come to mind a little bit when I see some of the decisions that are made, which is why did they spend that kind of money when they didn't have to? I mean, they can just sit on it for a little bit. I mean, meet your minimum if that's what you need to do, and then go from there. So.
Well, the salary floor this year is bigger than the cap was last year, right?
Yeah.
So they have to reach 85 million.
Yeah.
Now it's not some terrible penalty. I think the money just gets spread around to the other players.
Yes.
I love how it's like, no, we are reaching the floor. These other players are not getting it. But yeah, it's definitely a strange world from that point of view. Now we really can hit on the Warriors, who are the big story. I was talking to Tim about this earlier this week. Do you think the Warriors take the 2016 NBA championship or a guaranteed 5 years of Kevin Durant's prime?
I would say probably the 5 years of Kevin Durant's prime, because they might win 5 titles over that time.
Isn't that scary, that choice though?
I said the championship.
But it's sort of it's a legitimate choice. That was, I mean, not a choice. It's the legitimate reality.
But theoretically, they could have won the championship and still gone out and signed Kevin Durant. I mean,
They could have.
If you believe what you hear. I mean, Draymond Green and Curry had been recruiting him all year. You know, I mean, they'd been talking to him, since December about, coming over and joining them. So maybe he would have joined them regardless.
Yeah, I think though it would have been very difficult to do so from the public sentiment, even though he's still getting hit pretty good. But to jump onto the two in a row champions, and then to have been beaten by that team after being up 3-1, it's a very difficult thing to see. I think the choice really comes down to that, and it's crazy, but I think they have to make that choice because you're getting a certain level of certainty over 5 years. Even though I love Kevin Durant coming here. I almost said Garnett again. I love him coming here to Golden State. I just can't wait to watch the four of them. But the level that their depth has just been decimated, their bigs have been decimated. Now he can play bigger than he is, but that's scary if you're going to let him play bigger because the injury concerns are there. And you're already making Draymond Green play bigger than he is. Kevin Durant could sort of be like a stretch 5 if you want him to be. But I really am worried about the depth that they lost immediately from not being able, or from signing him. I mean, Bogut meant so much to that team. And look, he did get hurt quite a bit. His career has been one injury after another that are sort of aggression injuries. They're not like, it wasn't like he really fell apart, I think. I feel like he was in the mix a lot and he would get hurt from that. But there was just a roster that wins 73 games and did win a championship. So they held the two at one time. A roster that won 73 games is sort of a scary thing to undo, even if you're getting Kevin Durant. I think it's a little worrisome. They're obviously not going to get 73 wins, but they're going to be fighting to get these minimum contracts of players who are going to take a hit, in salary to come there, sort of like the Heat did. Now you always take the talent, but the Heat never got 70 wins. That part really, really kind of worries me.
I guess there are also some concerns at how it's going to work. I mean, they really don't have any interior presence. I mean, Zaza Pachulia is a nice player, but he's not like a rim protector. He rebounds well, but I mean, he's not going to deter someone from crashing through the lane and going to the rim. And
they're getting more and more of the same type of players.
Exactly. They're very, very perimeter oriented. And then you wonder, our team's going to start going to more big men? Are they going to say like, okay, well, we know we can't beat them on the perimeter. They're going to score there from anyway. Let's try and go beat them up inside.
Absolutely. And I think they, like, Spates played big and he could hit outside shots.
Yeah,
they just had all these pieces that were so good. Their team was so perfectly constructed. Now, again, you have to take Kevin Durant, but when you think about how just beautiful their roster was, you had Bogut down there. Ezeli and Barnes were very much exposed in the period of time where they could have done something to really make this not happen in a way. I mean, Barnes was a couple of 3-pointers in this series from being paid the max by Golden State and making this point moot. Ezeli was like a couple of actually staying down on defense and not being a dumbass from being here. Poor Bogut got injured. They lost so much depth, and you just think of the beauty of their roster. The thing I loved about it was the second unit was filled with players who were sort of playing a role that, like, Kevin Garnett and Ray Allen were ready to play as superstars when they got to Boston. You had these guys who were like top 10 picks. Some of them were top 5, who were ready to be complementary players. And everyone wants to talk about, everyone wanted to talk about the big three there, especially with Steph Curry and Klay Thompson and obviously Draymond Green. But it was having that depth of players who were willing to be role players. Sean Livingston was like, what, a number 4 pick?
Yeah.
Iguodala was like a 9 or a 10, I think. Bogut was a number 1.
Yeah.
That part is really worrisome because there is going to be a moment, like the world always evens out. There are going to be moments next year right away where you're watching this team and the underbelly is so obvious because you've taken for granted what was, down the line and in the depth of the team. It's going to be so obvious next year, and they're going to be scrambling to have to fill some hole. I mean, we remember the Heat were, 8-9, 9-8 that first year that they kicked off. I mean, that is now they all came together at the same time and had to figure it out together. I think Durant will be ready to slide in with these guys, and they're going to be ready to allow him to be the number 1 guy if he wants to be next year, which is a good thing. But I'm very, very worried about the bigs depth. And I think Chris Anderson is going to purposely not go to them. He might go to the Cavs, I hear.
Yeah,
now.
I heard that he was rumored going to the Cavs.
But it's worrisome to be playing around the edges with players like that at such an important role. It's kind of like, the Mets. I mean, their starters are falling apart now a little bit. But it's almost like the Mets having the big 4, and they can only afford the big 4, and then they're kind of scrounging around the Mexican leagues to look for a closer. Like, that underbelly is right there, and they're missing that last line of defense.
That Mets comparison is a good one. I agree. And I think you also missed Barbosa too in the finals. He was actually somebody who played really well.
So big.
He wasn't one of the role players who came back to earth. He actually superseded what we expected. I mean, I think he started the series out 11 of 14 or something like that from the field. So I mean,
he's a highly confident player.
Yeah. And I think he signed with the Suns 2 years, $8 million, I think. So I mean, he's only making $4 million a year. It's not like he got one of these.
How did he not get a big contract?
Yeah, he didn't get a Dellavedova contract or a Tyler Johnson contract.
And he should have. I mean, he's older.
He is older, but I mean, he didn't really cash in the way you would have expected with the rising cap.
What about Anderson Varejao? Is he in the mix still? I feel like he could be very important to have there.
Yeah, I feel like he could come back and probably be one of those vet minimum signings, kind of like the Pachulia deal, be at 2.9 or the West deal at 1.55, I think it was. So, I mean, I guess that's in the ballpark. I mean, he's an okay player. I don't know that he's going to move the needle for them, though.
I'm reserving judgment on the Warriors. So let's mark this whatever timestamp it is that we can go back and when they win 80 games, the championship, that how wrong I was. But I'm not saying that they won't win the championship, but I just don't think, I think it will not be quite as smooth a journey as everyone is anticipating for a lot of the reasons that you're pointing out, that they're losing their chemistry, they're losing their depth. Also, you get to the we were talking a little bit about that before. What I don't like about it is it has nothing to do with Kevin Durant leaving Oklahoma City and going to Golden State so much as it is how it has weakened the Western Conference overall. What was going to be an interesting Western Conference heading into next season because of Oklahoma City nipping at Golden State's heels because Golden State falling short because of a couple of other factors. It seemed like a much more interesting story where now it's not. It is, let's watch Golden State, see how that works itself out, but everything beneath it doesn't seem quite as compelling.
Isn't it highly possible that Oklahoma City could still be a major thorn in Golden State's side? Because they're going to have the added motivation of wanting to show up Durant. And there is nothing they could do about those bigs in that series. Now there's absolutely nothing they can do. At least Bogut, again, was a number one player. He was a number one draft pick. He was unbelievably athletic, too, for his age and his size. Like, there were a lot of times where they'd throw half-court alley-oops to him on the run. He set amazing picks. He played big. They don't have an enforcer. I mean, Draymond can be an enforcer, but that actually is a danger for him to have to be the enforcer because he doesn't know how to go up to the line and stop. He's like, oh, well, this guy actually wants to fight. I'm going to kick him where the sun doesn't shine. But Oklahoma City is going to be a major problem for them with those, especially with Steven Adams. I mean, maybe they shouldn't have given Ibaka up at this point, but they're going to be pretty good. They're probably going to almost be the way. Now, we had a Twitter thing where you didn't agree with the front end part of my argument where I said that Kevin Durant is kind of going to a team like the 2010 Miami Heat, but leaving a team like the 2014 Miami Heat. He's leaving a team who still could get 45 to 48 wins this season. And Russell Westbrook, if he stays, could be a monster out there. Oladipo could be a perfect complement to him, not having to be a guy who needs the ball all the time to play defense. Their roster is still really good.
It is, and I really would have liked to have seen what Kevin Durant would have done with the Oladipo pickup, because I think what he brings is a guy who can guard Klay Thompson. He's a perimeter defender, a guy who they can switch onto multiple guards. He can guard Curry, he can guard Klay. So, I think he was a good pickup, and they also added Sabonis. So, Ilyasova, I guess, is just, depth at that point. But, I thought that was a really good deal, and I think with Adams and Kanter, like, Ibaka was sort of getting lost in the mix. So, I think his role was diminished. So, I think that getting rid of him, I'm not saying they didn't lose anything, but he wasn't that like shot blocker, that dominant defensive player that we saw in years past. So I think his role had sort of diminished. So they traded him for a guy who filled the role that they needed a little more.
Right. And I wonder now if it was an insurance policy because there was, when you read all the stuff with Durant and Oklahoma City, they were sort of having the feeling that it wasn't looking good. And I also found it really that Royce Young?
Royce Young.
That was a great article that he was able to put together. And like I almost feel like the article was especially good because he's Oklahoma bred and he sort of was just all in on Durant coming back, and you could feel how much that took away from that team. But it was kind of sad when you have these like billionaire owners and then you have like the brain trust of the entire team. I even think you were with the Nets when Matt Tumbleson was there, or not yet?
I wasn't, no.
Yeah, so he was the Nets coordinator of public relations. Amazing guy. And now he's their head of public relations at Oklahoma City. And I think they brought him even because there was a quote where Kevin Durant said he's one of the few people I trust. Matty Ice called him. And if anybody's hearing stuff from groups of people who are not Matty Ice, Matt Tumbleson, or this guy and this guy, it's not true. And so I was like, wow. So I think they brought him out there. But there was that story how they're in the Hamptons. Kevin Durant has this beautiful home and they're staying at a Holiday Inn because there was nothing open on July 4th. And they were sleeping 4 to a room. The Holiday Inn Express going to the Fridays. It was kind of a sad end to that
just
Oklahoma City run.
Shows how bad they wanted him.
It does. They came back again.
Let's think about the Thunder for a second. So let's go back 4 years. It's 2012. They just lose in the finals to the Heat. But they have Harden. They have Westbrook. They have Durant. They have Ibaka. They have Perkins. Cephalosha. If we were having a conversation about that team right now, like, okay, you've got to keep these guys together. They're set for the future. I know there were rumblings about Harden heading into the draft and maybe being traded. Taking a look at that, looking at this Golden State team, I'm not saying it's the same because they're more established. They've already won their championship, but things fall apart. If I told you then 4 years into the future that only one of those players would be left on Oklahoma City, even after almost getting to the finals again,
Billy Donovan would be their coach.
Billy Donovan, you probably wouldn't have believed it. So as we're looking at the Warriors today with Kevin Durant with a 2-year contract with a player option for the second, we don't really know. I mean, we can project 5 years into the future, and that's why I say take the championship as opposed to 5 years of Kevin Durant, because you just don't know. You never know how things are going to work themselves out.
The team they played.
Yeah.
Look at the Heat at this same time. The only one standing is Bosch, and he might not be standing.
Mm-hmm. So things just have a way of, we just never know how they're going to work out. So, I mean, I'm interested to see what happens with the Warriors. I'm not making any predictions that they're going to have problems. They won't have problems. They'll breach at this. I do think it won't be as easy as people are making out for a lot of the reasons you cited. One thing I'll also say is you pointed out, which is a good observation about how when LeBron went to the Heat in 2010, he wasn't going to a system. Whereas Durant is now going to a system that works. It works almost to perfection. Yeah. And he's getting plugged in there. Is that good or bad? I don't know.
And he thinks he wants that.
Yeah. Is
it good or bad? Maybe he doesn't.
Yeah. I mean, we don't know if putting a weapon of that well calibrated into an already existing system is going to, I mean, it could take it to the next level or it could break down. We just don't know. Whereas the Heat, it took them until I think round 2 of the second year of the playoffs to really figure out what they were. That's when I think it finally clicked for them what their system was. So it happened organically as opposed to this is kind of prefab. Let's stick Kevin Durant in.
And it happened when they let LeBron be the best player.
Yes.
Too.
Yeah. And let LeBron be a power forward as opposed to a small forward. And I'm just saying, yeah, I mean, I'm not down on it saying it's not going to work, but I think just based on some past experience, I just am entering with some caution about its short-term and long-term viability.
I think it's almost like there's this idea, and we've seen it happen so much in sports when you live long enough in it, even when we're only in our 30s or 40s, like or you're probably still 20s, right?
29.
So you're at the end of it.
We span.
Yes. But you see enough in all these sports, and these things, they never turn out exactly the way it looks like they're gonna.
Look at the Nets.
Exactly. Look at the Nets, and they tried to build this on the cheap and on the fringe, and they had all the wrong people. This and the Heat looked like they had all the right people, but you look at them, it's not going to be 4, it's not going to be 5, it's not going to be 6. They got there all 4 times, but they still only won 50% of the time, and they were within a Ray Allen 3 of only winning one of them, and they were. If they had won the last one, LeBron probably stays. Just like if Oklahoma City had won that round, or if Golden State had won the finals, these things just don't happen. They're all so close within periods of time for these things to happen. And there really is going to be a moment. I just have this weird flash forward where, first off, health is not a given here.
No.
When we're talking feet with a big man, we're talking joints, ankles with a little man. I mean, people who go to the hoop, Devin Harris, I mean, you remember when he came to the Nets, he was considered a top player. And he had that one Western road trip where he's putting up like 54, 48. Small players, Brandon Jennings, who's now a Knick. Remember, he put up 57 or something right away, and he was looking like small players have the ability to do amazing things, but they also have a penchant for just being destroyed by injuries and being worn down and not having the kind of muscle mass or whatever to keep up with the game to play with the Giants. Steph Curry had 2 scary things happen in those playoffs. Now, Golden State was able to overcome it to a degree, but he missed 40 some odd games a couple of years. Like, he's not a given at this point, especially with what we saw last playoffs. Kevin Durant is not a given. I mean, those feet things are scary. We've seen Ilgauskas, we've seen Brook now come back to a degree from it. So it can be fine. But he was injured at the beginning of last year too, where we went, uh-oh, and I think it was a hamstring. So it's very tenuous. And now they can't afford more than ever for one of these players to fall off. They have way too much baked into these players for them to fall apart. And then, what if Steph does get really injured? Are they going to give him $175 million next year? I mean, they probably have to, but players can get old really quickly.
Sure.
And the other thing I was thinking of, and I'm supposed to have Jonathan Abrams, who wrote the Prep to Pros book, on next week. And I wanted to bring this up to him. The Cleveland against Golden State final was sort of an A/B test of 2 ways to doing things. Cleveland is mostly the high school to NBA / one and doneers. A lot of those players would have not gone to college if they, Kevin Love probably would not have gone to college. Kyrie would have not gone to college. He barely did. They were sort of the prep to pros, like one and doneers against Golden State, who were the 3 and 4 year pros pretty much across the board. Even Andrew Bogut came into the league, I think, at 21. He played 2 years at Utah, but I think he came in late there. But all those players played, 3 to 4 years, mostly 3. And so Steph is maybe a little older than he seems.
He's 28, actually. He's been in the league a while, actually.
He'll be 29 next year. Durant will be 28 next year. Clay's a bit younger, maybe 26 or 27.
26, I want to say.
And then Draymond is 25 or 26. He might even be a little older. But all I'm saying is when guys start to get to the upper 20s, all of a sudden they're 31. And all of a sudden you're thinking about the same things we thought about with LeBron. Luckily he got this championship this year. However they did it, I don't know. But you started to go, uh-oh. I was almost comparing when Kevin Durant left Oklahoma City to win. When the player doesn't have the championship at a certain level, it almost becomes like a woman going into her 30s and she hasn't had a kid yet. And all of a sudden the biological clock, it's like a biological clock for kids and championships. But it really is tenuous. Things that look great never work out. That Nets thing, they have 44 wins? I mean, that was all that was all they got out of it. And one first round defeat of Toronto, who we've come to find out are like the worst playoff team of players ever.
Yeah. Their best year was 49 and 33. And that was with PJ as the coach. And they got rid of him, brought in Kidd, and you're right, 44. So I mean, that was kind of a bust.
Yeah, I was going to your point. This is a larger point about free agency, which is, to me, the most interesting player in the league right now because of how everything is shaken out is Russell Westbrook. And that's a very interesting story for me. Does he become the next Anthony Hardaway? Where when 20 years ago Shaquille O'Neal left, then it became Anthony Hardaway's team in Orlando, and
electric player who got hurt.
Yeah, and people forget how I think people do forget just how special a player Anthony Hardaway was.
Did you guys both see the magic moment?
Yeah.
I think that hit home. It gave him his due a little bit.
I didn't realize quite how explosive he was because I was younger at the time. I knew he was a great player, but I didn't realize he was NBA dominant.
He was fantastic. He was unlike anything you had seen up until that point. Now that's an exaggeration, but he really was spectacular. And then unfortunately injury. So, does he become say Anthony Hardaway, or does he go the Allen Iverson route, which is what I worry about for him because he plays so physically. He's almost like Rafael Nadal, where he just goes all out every single game that he's going to hit a wall. And does he hit that wall sooner rather than later? Which is maybe something that Kevin Durant was thinking about when he made his decision. Who knows? But where does he go from here? I mean, there's a chance he could be MVP next year. If he stays in Oklahoma City, he could be the MVP just based on spite and hate alone fueling him. He's capable of doing that. He's capable of averaging a triple-double, I think, through the season.
It might be his best place to stay after all is said and done.
So I'm interested to see what happens. I mean, does he push a trade? Does he force a trade? And the whole, I guess we talked the numbers maybe work out a little bit, but then when they come to him and say, will you sign a long-term extension now? Unless that is to his financial advantage to do so, I don't really read that as being a sign of his disloyalty to the organization or the sign that he won't make a commitment. I mean, who would do that if you're saying you can sign today for less money than you can make next year if you signed with us long-term? So I don't know.
Well, and like the other hard part for him is he's sort of the guy, like when you're at a company and people start quitting, you never want to be the second or third guy who goes in to quit because it's like, that actually happened to me at the Nets. The guy I worked with, Adam, he quit first and then I had to go. And then they're all like starting to get really worried, like the whole web team. And so I got such a full court press. I'm like, that ends up actually turning you off to the whole thing. And he's in this situation now where it's like they lost the one and they're so afraid to lose the other that they're going to be like they're smothering them. And why would he, it's not even him being mean. Why would he accept the deal right now? It doesn't make any sense unless he's going to get hurt. But like, you can't go into a season thinking you're going to get hurt. I mean, the guy's had his face broken. He still always comes back, but he's in a tough spot from that point of view. Now, the thing you always know with Oklahoma City, they just know how to draft players. I mean, They don't know how to make trades in a lot of ways, but man, do they know how to draft. They just have amazing draft history. And that's why I wonder, I don't know, I don't think we said this on here, but I was thinking, does Pat Riley, because now he's looking bad to people. He's starting to look like, oh, he's losing it on the fastball. No one cares about the rings on the table. What do rings from before I was born mean? He's got the white slick back hair. The Gordon Gekko thing's gone from the 80s. It's not really working with these players. They're millennials. They want to play together. They don't care about destroying the other team. And I wonder, is this his moment to try to to turn the narrative and say, Sam Presti, what do you want? Can I get Russell here? And they are the type of city where you take the gamble on the 1 year because maybe you can. It's easier to get a guy to stay in Miami than it is in most other places. Like I was thinking Boston would be great because they're swinging and missing, and they got Horford, which by the way, to me, we'll hit on that in a bit actually, but they got Horford. They sort of got to do something now. They got to go all in. Horford's 30 and all of a sudden he's going to start to get older as a big man. And he's not a great number one to run your team. It's sort of another piece. It's a super piece from what they already have. If they tried to get him, he's not staying in Boston. People don't want to go to Boston and kind of sign free agent deals there long term. But Pat Riley can do it. And what I'm trying to get at is, does Oklahoma City, who knows how to draft, where did they have Justice Winslow on their draft board? Was it someone where they're like, this is such a dynamic player, we would have drafted him, so we'll accept him because he's still only, 20 now?
Yeah.
Might even still be 19 or 20. That's the kind of move that Pat Riley could make and make things happen.
Well, Boston was willing to give up basically their whole draft to take Winslow last year. And they were offering like 4 first-round picks to Charlotte, and they really wanted Frank Kaminsky. So
That's right. That's right. But I wonder, and that I think makes them markedly better in an Eastern Conference next year. And it's the ultimate middle finger from Pat Riley to all these stars. And you're going to get him that 1 year. He's going to be a monster.
Well, you talk about Westbrook being in a tough spot. I think OKC management's in a tough spot because imagine losing Durant and Westbrook back-to-back years and getting nothing for them.
Right.
It's.
And I understand both sides because, like, Durant, it's so unfair for him to get killed for this. He doesn't owe Oklahoma City anything. They took it from Seattle and moved it there. He's drafted there. I love this idea that because you're drafted in a place it's almost like being adopted. It doesn't mean the kid doesn't want to go see his birth parent. I mean, like, just because you're adopted, good for them. But they got this great player who gave 9 years of his 20s to the team.
I don't know that anyone's knocking Durant for leaving Oklahoma City. I think it's where he chose to go. I don't think that. I don't know about you, but
if he had gone to Boston, it would be different.
Yeah. I thought that if he had gone to the Celtics, I don't know that anyone's hammering him. But I think
that's so unfair to him, though. Like, that's so unfair to him if he chooses one place over another. If you're going to leave, go to the best place.
Yeah, but
you know what I mean?
When was the last time you've seen a player leave what is a great team and go to the best team who has just beaten him several times? I don't know that I've ever seen it. Imagine Michael going to play with the Pistons and Isaiah Thomas after losing to them. I don't know that I've seen it before. Maybe it's happened. I just don't recall.
I agree with that. But what I'm saying is, for the argument that if he goes to Boston, people don't feel as bad on that. I think the minute you're going to leave, go to the best. Just go to the best place. If you're going to leave, don't then go, well, I'll go to Boston and then people won't hate me as much. The minute you're leaving, there's already a certain amount of hate. Just go all in.
But I think if he wins titles there, are they, I guess in history, no one looks at them as watered down. But
it's a lot like the Heat, actually, because they won in the mid-2000s, and then LeBron and Bosh go there and win more. It's sort of like if Durant goes, and again, maybe I'll hit the Horford point. This whole idea that getting Horford is this watershed moment in like the history of the franchise is such a joke to me. It's sort of like last year, they're not the same player. But when Milwaukee wanted all this credit for getting Greg Monroe, he signed with us over the Knicks. Maybe that should have made you go like, uh-oh, this is not a player we want. And he stunk. Horford's not him. But I just can't imagine from watching Horford. And by the way, his team who had him pretty much chose Dwight Howard over him. That says a lot. That to me, that you're willing to go, you know what? We really love Horford, but he wasn't even the best player on our team. Let's try Dwight Howard. And then we'll see and then they go and they're like, well, we want to sign Horford. Yeah, Horford and Howard make a lot of sense in this new NBA. but they chose him. This idea that him going there changes the balance and dynamic of the whole conference and makes people want to go play with him. I mean, is he Jason Kidd all of a
I
sudden?
mean, I don't know that Horford's a superstar. I mean, I don't think he's as great as I think Boston thinks he is, but he's
Yeah.
definitely a lot better than what they had. So I mean, like they're basically replacing nothing
Sullinger.
with they're replacing nothing with something very good. It's not amazing, it's not superstar, but they're putting something very good on a team that was already good. You know, good, not great, but it definitely helps.
I think it's weird though that Boston thought getting him, and Bill Simmons was like this too, and I guess it's where you can see fandom kick in. People always think their place is like the best because that's what they grew up liking. The whole idea of him going there with that roster is going to make Kevin Durant leave OKC.
Well, no, I mean, I agree with you.
They did think that.
That's outlandish. But if you pose it like this, would Kevin Durant be more likely to go to Boston with Al Horford than without him? He's more likely to go there with him. So,
but to me, it's like it's a little bit more.
And I think that's probably Danny Ainge going back to 2007 when Kevin Durant, sorry, I did it in the reverse now. Kevin Garnett. Kevin Garnett wouldn't go to Boston, but then when they got Ray Allen, that changed his mind. So he may be thinking along those lines.
He needed another piece, though.
Yeah.
He would have needed, and I heard Bill Simmons say, well, then they would get Jimmy Butler. Like, is Jimmy...
I didn't think Jimmy Butler was gettable.
I know. Well, there's sort of this whole thing with a certain level of players. I think when certain people watch the NBA too much, they fall in love with players more than they should be falling in love with.
I actually did think
this from someone who likes Memphis and Dallas.
I do.
Go ahead.
I know. Months ago, I actually did think Horford was going to end up in Boston. This free, irrespective of anything else that went on, I just felt that he fit there. He fit their roster, and that was a team that he would want to play, and has nothing to do with Durant going there. And I never really thought Durant. I mean, there may be in like a minute or two on Sunday night when I thought Kevin Durant maybe would go to Boston. I don't know why, but I didn't think that.
Boston is almost turned back into the Red Sox, and the Yankees became Golden State.
Talking about disasters, can we talk about Chicago?
Yeah.
I mean, for a second, I think I wrote in my mind, at least, since I don't have a Twitter account, which was Rajon Rondo
They're literally drunkenly drafting a fantasy basketball team and making trades like on the weekends to turn in a 27-year-old broken down point guard who has 1 year on his deal, who's from Chicago, only to replace him with Rajon Rondo and Dwayne Wade.
They are trying to send Fred Hoiberg back to college.
Yeah,
I think that was their free agency plan.
The Tim Floyd moment.
We are trying to get this guy to go back to college, because how they thought that he had a difficult time managing that locker room last year. And you send in Rajon Rondo and Dwayne Wade into that mix right now,
and take away Derek. I mean, wow! I'm just in utter.
They have no idea what they want to do. That's
they don't.
They have no idea what they want.
They're just being opportunistic, but not in the right way.
Mm-hmm.
It's just I'm completely shocked by that team. They're more watchable now for a minute.
It actually kind of reminds me of like Golden State more than 15 years ago, when they were making some like crazy deals where like they brought in like Mookie Blaylock, and then they would bring in John Starks, and then they would bring in these like past their prime guards and talk themselves into it. Like, didn't they? Yeah, they traded Jason Terry to Atlanta for Mookie Blaylock, and then they had somebody else in that same backcourt who was like, what are they doing? Yeah, the Knicks. Yeah, I had a fan from the Knicks say, "Oh, what do you think of what we did?" I was like, "Oh, you got a great team in 2008."
The NBA has become on the whole more watchable now from a league pass point of view. A lot more teams, at least for me, are in play to go there and watch it, when before I wouldn't. I was just locked into watching Golden State, OKC.
Will you watch them beyond December?
Well, we'll see. That's the key. They're more watchable right away.
Yeah, they are, because we want to see November. It's interesting to see who's where and how it looks. And then comes January, you just want to watch good basketball.
I have a theory, and probably a million people have this theory, that when the worst thing a player can do is be with one team for his career and then switch in his mid-30s, because the new uniform ages that player so starkly that it's almost like they've turned into they're 5 years older now. Like I actually was going to talk about this with Dwayne Wade. Dwayne Wade and Derek Jeter, to me, are like so similar. They're drafted into one place. They play there for a long time. They play with several incarnations of great players from their respective leagues. When you think of Dwayne Wade with the first group of Lamar Odom, Caron Butler, then the next group he's got Shaq, Gary Payton comes in there at the end. I could go up and down. I mean, I can't think
Jason
of
Williams.
Jason Williams. Just these different groupings of players. Then obviously into the Dwayne and LeBron and Chris Bosh, and he's just had these different incarnations. And then it felt like, just like Jeter, they reached the point where they're the age where if they weren't with that team, nobody would keep them. If they weren't with that team and built up that history. With the Yankees, you remember Brian Cashman they played those last negotiations with Jeter. He was 37, but they played those negotiations brutally. They were like, no, we're going to move on. He told him we want Troy Tulowitzki to his face. Same thing here. It's just that Dwayne, who was offered a ridiculous amount of money still, but he chose for a little bit more. And who knows with the income tax thing, how that plays out, but he chose for a little more to go home. And it's sort of like Jeter going home to play for the Tigers or something, which I think were one of the teams. Dwayne Wade and Jeter, his last year was pretty bad. And he got injured too. And in that other one, this could happen to Wade, and he could look really old and embarrassing really quickly. And the expectations on him are not at a point in his career where he can have those expectations on him. At 34, we've been thinking he's old for 5 years already. It was a bad look for both of them, and Pat Riley didn't want to keep him, really.
I agree.
But they made him a deal where, let's be fair, he was offered the same money that he had last year, which was a lot of money. This whole idea, I need to be paid the most. You either had to be Revis in your career or you had to be the guy who you were. He chose to be the guy who he was all through his prime, where it's like, no, I want to get guys in, I want to win. And then all of a sudden he wants all the money. I don't know. I think it's a tough situation for him, but one for which he should have stayed. His home is Miami now. He's going home to Chicago. All of a sudden he's like, I'm home. Like, come on.
But I think they insulted him with their initial offer. Their initial offer was 1 year, $10 million. And when you see Dellavedova making almost $10 million a year, basically he's been taking pay cuts for the last number of years so that they could make the salaries with Bosh and LeBron and, Dragic and Whiteside work. And I think he felt that after they, lost out on maybe some of those guys, that they owed him for all the money that maybe he left on the table. And then when they offer him 1 year, $10 million, it's like, now you're insulting me by saying that I'm worth less than what Mozgov gets. I'm worth,
Did he want the Kobe deal? Is that what he wanted? He probably did.
He did. He sort of got it.
Yeah. I think he probably.
But it wasn't. To me, it wasn't enough, and it just became a stare down where it was like, well, you got to match the Chicago number, and it's like, we're probably okay with this. It allowed everyone to get out, but Dwayne Wade's going to be the one who looks the worst because he's just going to look really bad with Chicago. He's going to be injured, and the minute he puts that Bulls uniform on, you're going to go, oh my God. It was like when Gary Payton, he got traded at 34 to Milwaukee. He looked old there. And remember, he had to play Jason Kidd in that first round. Yeah. And then when he went to the Lakers, he looked old. And when he went to the Heat, he really looked old.
And the Celtics. He had to stop in the with the Celtics as well.
Absolutely. When you stay in your uniform, you're only one highlight away from looking like the same player, just a little older. You leave, all you have is now that moment forward.
Talking about Pat Riley, though, I mean, we've been criticizing a lot of GMs for making what we would consider to be imprudent decisions. Should we not be praising him a little bit for actually doing what we're criticizing the other GMs for not having done, which is holding to what he considers? Well,
we got to see if he matches Tyler Johnson first, right?
Yeah, I agree with you, though. And I don't think he's going to match Tyler Johnson for exactly that reason of what you mentioned earlier, that maybe let's just wait a year, and there's a lot of good free agents next year. So they save the money on Wade, they save the money on Tyler Johnson, and now they can go sign someone next year. Absolutely.
I think you pay for primetime players, let everyone else go. The Heat have shown, as has Portland, as has to a degree Golden State, we can get anyone in here who we believe is our type of player, and we are player development superstars. I mean, Portland is massively amazing at player development. They just make players who make money elsewhere and are really good. I mean, we talked about this where Portland's roster last year looks unbelievably good when those players have left. And then they still made it to the playoffs and won a round. I mean, it was a weird win. It wasn't quite real, but their development is unbelievable. I mean, if Curry and Thompson were not out there, their backcourt is disgustingly good.
Yeah, part of I think what you're saying is a good point, which is that each franchise has to have a degree of self-awareness as to its strengths and its weaknesses and where it falls in the market. And maybe some franchises that flounder a little bit don't have that self-awareness, like maybe a Milwaukee thinking that they're something that they're not in terms of a destination. And whereas Pat Riley knows what he has in Miami, so he doesn't have to necessarily follow a certain path this season because he knows that the strengths that he possesses will be there to his benefit next season, which is a nice transition, I think, to the Nets, because from my standpoint, I think they're making the right decisions because they know what they are, which is we're not going to get certain types of players yet. Better for them to pay for potential as opposed to performance. So let's bring in Jeremy Lin as opposed to Rajon Rondo. Let's bring in Tyler Johnson, who still maybe who can maybe exceed his contract as somebody who's already played to a contract and never will meet that, based on their past performance. So I think they knew, look, we are what we are. We're not going to get top line free agents. We're not going to get.
We bought a draft pick.
Let's not
let's
not overpay for free agents who were good 5 years ago and pay them on their past performance. Maybe let's go after guys who other teams have developed, identified, and it's a lot of money for them, but there's a better chance that they'll play into that contract as opposed to not.
Well, basically they're doing the opposite of what Billy King did.
Yes.
Every guy that he acquired or signed was somebody who was over the hill and on the downside of their career. Now they're throwing the same kind of money, but at guys who their best days you would hope would be in front of them.
Well, and we hear Kenny Atkinson is a player development guy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Sean Marks, I do think, as outlandish as these contracts seem right now, they all are. I mean, I probably would rather pay Crabbe. It's so weird to say it. I'd rather pay Crabbe 83 than Evan Turner 75.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree.
Portland, look, maybe he'll be unbelievable there too, because they just know how to get magic out of players. I think Portland is a good place to play in that you're out of the eye of things, but you're still in the West Coast. You could still put up, they had like a 15-game win streak this year, right? Or 12 or something. You can, I think they had a really good win streak.
Yeah, I don't know the exact number.
They can, I want you to know it right now.
Okay.
No, but you can kind of do things, and when you do positive stuff, you're on SportsCenter. Anything else that's, unless you're the Jailblazers and you're really doing bad stuff.
Mm-hmm.
No, we smoked it all when the cop pulls them over. Wow. But you got to give them a benefit of the doubt because they're a new regime. Until the things start backfiring, their first moves you just can't really criticize, especially with the lot they were walking into. And we'll see what Atkinson can do. Jeremy Lin does tremendous stuff when the spotlight's not on him. I mean, the weird thing with him is he was a 6-man last year. He put up really good numbers, but is he now going to be in the spot? Well, he's not going to be the spot he was in Houston. They were ready to win. Wasn't he in the first year of the Dwight year? Was that when he was traded, or was that before that? I feel like it was. He's another Darren Williams years type guy.
Yeah,
where it feels like he's still only like 27 or 20.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, he's 27. I don't remember if he was there with Dwight or not.
I thought that he was part of that.
Went there in the offseason 2012.
So that would have been. Yeah, I don't remember. I don't remember. Like these years, when you're bad, years just drag when things don't go well. But
no, it was the following year that Dwight went there.
Okay.
Because
he was still on it though that year,
and
then he was moved to the Lakers.
I think I moved to the Lakers
only after 1 year.
I thought so.
Well, let's bring this to a complete halt right now.
Mm-hmm.
No, but
I think the Nets have a plan. They're basically saying, okay, we have Brook in the center. We're going to surround him with wings who are athletic, who can shoot threes, who can play defense, and so that's why they got rid of Thaddeus Young, because he didn't really space the floor. He had that interior game as well, so they figured let's bring in guys who can play around the perimeter, drive, cut to the rim, and that kind of thing. So I think Crabbe fits that. Tyler Johnson fits that. So
they're watchable now. They're definitely watchable.
I almost feel like, in some ways, that they're trying to build a Celtics type team, but whereas the Celtics did it through the draft, they're doing it through free agency with some of their acquisitions.
Do you take? I still think I like Brook better than Al Horford
Yeah, I like Brook better as an
on the
offense.
contract too.
Yeah, and I like Brook much better as an offensive player,
Mhm.
but I like Al Horford better as a defensive player. So
Yeah, but it's interesting that if you surround it, they could be pesky. And if Atkinson is a really good player development guy, as we've heard, there's something to be watchable there. I mean, last year you knew all the players they had were just like
Yeah.
nobodies.
Yeah.
They're basically D League players. They're paying for players on potential, and if they can keep the heat off of all these guys, maybe they're able to, as a group, be greater than the sum of the parts.
At a minimum, maybe next year the Celtics are drafting 10th as opposed to first. Which
Yeah,
would be a victory
Yeah,
because
that's
they swapped the pick.
Yeah.
So it won't look as egregious when, okay, they dropped from 10th in the draft to 21st. That won't be as hard to swallow as, okay, they could have had the first pick. So
Yeah.
if
Jeremy
nothing
Lin
else,
was there 2 years.
okay.
He was. Here's the amazing thing with Lin. Last year, you have this perception of him having a tremendous year, and it was because they used him the right way. He was the sixth man. He had crazy hairdos. He hit big shots, but he had 11.7 points per game last year. When he was with the Lakers, he had 11.2. It's sort of like the Darren Williams thing.
I think
His
it's the
last year with the
Byron Scott thing.
Nets, he was like 14 points,
Yeah.
8 assists, and he went to Dallas. He pretty much had the same numbers. It's funny that there's certain guys where you plug them in. It's like quarterbacks, in the NFL. If you can surround them with the right people, if you can do the right things, if they can be kind of ingrained into a culture, you can get the best out of them. But they're not culture makers. It's not Kevin Durant going to a new team. You are now a new team. It's not Kevin Garnett going to a new team, like going to the Celtics, and they said he changed our whole culture. Jason Kidd going to the Nets changed our entire culture. Everywhere he went, he really changed the culture of the team to an unselfish level. Lin's going to plug in here. When he went to Houston, they wanted him to be a culture changer, and he just can't do that. Probably to a degree at the Lakers too. Like, he's not going to change your team in like a big swing win kind of way. He's probably going to get you a couple of wins if you're really good already, because he'll be a good kind of fourth quarter guy. But he's made a lot of money in his career too. By the time he's 31, I think I saw he'll make 70 million. That's or 65. That's pretty good for him. A pretty good career. So the other thing I want to talk with Kevin Durant, if we want to bring in Silicon Valley, the ideals of, he was kind of like an acqui-hire. You buy his company and bring him into Golden State. And I think the key here is Golden State going to treat him coming in the way Google does, which is they buy a company like Nest, for instance. Nest is the thermostat people, and they tried to make smart fire alarms and smart home stuff. And really all they could do was the Nest. It was the guy who Tony Fadell created the iPod, the original iPod, and that's why the Nest looks like the original iPod with the wheel. They brought them in for a big amount of money, and they said, we're going to put him in here, and we're going to put Nest in here, and we're just going to give them the backing of Google, and now they're really going to take off. Well, Tony Fadell was just fired. Nest basically was not a part of their Google Home, which was supposed to be an Amazon Echo competitor, which is over there. And so it was a failure. Facebook buys companies like Instagram, like was it WhatsApp, or it was one of those chat things, and then allows Instagram to be Instagram, and they give them a little bit of integration like with their ad network, but they allow Instagram to be Instagram because people want that. Doesn't it kind of seem like Golden State's going to have to do that as opposed to the Google point of view? Tim, you are an economist, so
I'm not. Let's just be clear. I'm not an economist.
don't they have to let him be him? I mean, I know we want to talk about him,
But what is Kevin Durant? I mean, when you say let him be him, that's you usually say that about players like a Russell Westbrook, where their style is just so unique in some way that, or Allen Iverson, or, where they had to build the entire Sixers around him. Kevin Durant, I mean, I don't know. I don't see him as being that unconventional a player. I mean,
maybe he doesn't
special.
mind being in corporate America.
He might not. That's what I'm saying. I don't get the sense that
I've been a startup.
Yeah, his game. He doesn't seem like someone who bristles under some level of structure. I think. I think he's maybe more of a company man, where he goes in and
Is he a
Like,
if he ends up being that though? Is it a diminished return from what? I'm so interested to see based on expectations. I can't wait to see this team play.
Let me just say this: I almost think of Kevin Durant switching to Oklahoma, going to Golden State, almost as if, let's just say, back in 2000, Tim Duncan had gone to Orlando.
Right.
It feels similar. I mean, it's not similar because totally different.
No, it's actually very
the
similar.
teams.
The cultures are the same. Presti came from the San Antonio culture and tried to build. The one thing I'm very interested with this is he tried to build Mayberry in a way out of Oklahoma City, their team, the community. He almost tried to be like the girl who wants you to marry them so bad. And, you know, you're married to them. They try to do everything possible to make it all look good. And you're like, I'm in the Truman Show right now. I think Kevin Durant was in the Truman Show. Oklahoma City is severed from the rest of the country. You are not in anything. You're sort of living in a set. You know, it's not a major city. No matter how big you can be, you're still living in the town that you're in. You could go into other cities and travel to them, you know, for a night or for back-to-backs, but you're still living there. He's living in the little brownstone. He owns a little restaurant, but it's Oklahoma City. Like, they shouldn't have an NBA team, sort of. And so I think there's a point where he was like, this feels a little cultish. I'm all for this family stuff. I like that. But you know what? Like LeBron said, I went to Miami to go to college, in a way. Durant was only in college 1 year. He was here for this whole time. He was in a real city at the beginning in Seattle, but otherwise he's been in Mayberry. He's been in the Truman Show. And then now he's like, I'm ready to be cosmopolitan. I'm ready to get my shoe sales back up.
I buy that. I mean, I do buy that point of view, like from a personal standpoint of wanting to play in a more cosmopolitan setting, more.
And Oklahoma City has to do this all the time. They don't have another cell.
No, and that's why, again, I think Orlando is a good example. I mean, it's a good analog for them because
same type of cities.
Does Oklahoma City have to sit around and wait to get the #1 pick again, to be their Dwight Howard? Do they have to wait to get their Dwight Howard? I mean, that is, you know, presupposing that Russell Westbrook leaves. So is Oklahoma City the new Orlando in some way? But
and that's okay.
That's okay. And to go back to your point,
Serge Ibaka can tell us.
Durant fitting in with Golden State, I do. I like it more to Tim Duncan. I don't think we'd be having that conversation like, how are they going to integrate Tim Duncan into Orlando? Tim Duncan's a great player. He plays a certain way. He, I think he would be, you know, kind of in the best possible way. There's no negative connotation. A good company man. I expect that from Durant. I don't think they necessarily have to think about how they're going to. I mean, they have to think about how they're going to integrate him on the court, but into the overall organization, I don't see that as being much of a problem.
And I don't think it's a negative that OKC is this or that Orlando is this. I think you have to be, and actually, wasn't Rob Hennigan an assistant to Presti, or was it? Yeah. So it's sort of the same thing. And maybe that's why they bring in a guy like that, because they go, we are this kind of city. But, you know, in some ways, Orlando, both those, but Orlando and Oklahoma City are the small city on top of the big ones. Like Dallas is sort of, you know, equivalent.
Miami.
Miami. But, you know, I just sort of wonder if that's not a bad thing, because you get potentially, if the guy signs his first deal with you, you're getting 8 or 9 years of a player. How much did Orlando get of Dwight? Was it, he came in at 18 or 19 and then was gone at 26 or 27?
2004, he was #1 pick, and then he left in 2012. 2013. No, 2012.
Everybody's on a ticking clock, whether you get the player at the front end or the back end.
Yeah, I think what's the reason why I get to go back to Oklahoma City and Orlando, I'm thinking Orlando mid-90s, which is the sad part for me is looking at Oklahoma City where they were 4 to 5 years ago, that we didn't get to see more of those 4 players together and see those 4 players actually win a championship together. And that was exciting, was that Oklahoma City, this team very quickly acquired the right type of players. They like to get that type of talent in one place at one time, and then to see that talent peel off is kind of sad as an NBA fan. I would have liked to have seen that actualize in some way. Kind of like, I mean, it's not as sad. I'm not sad when I think about the Dennis Scott, Nick Anderson, Anthony Hart, but that was also a case where, like, wow, we were able to get Anthony Hardaway and Shaquille O'Neal in the same place at the same time, and then it just disappeared in a pretty quick period of time. Same kind of thing, like to get Russell Westbrook, Kevin Durant, James Harden, and Serge Ibaka in the same place at the same time, to that not have gone further is just a little disappointing.
Was there giving up the 3-1 lead like Nick Anderson's 3 free throws?
Yeah.
You know, that was an amazing part of that documentary.
Mhm.
You always hear Nick Anderson free throws, and I knew it, but seeing the documentary, it was so much worse.
Mhm.
That was not a sweep.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
I mean, that was one free throw from being a legitimate series. They were the home team.
Yeah, and that was a good Houston Rockets team, but they were an unusual Houston Rockets team. Like the season before, that was a stronger Rockets team, but the 95
It was sort of
team,
like the Dallas Mavericks.
they were
Like
playing
the 2011 Dallas Mavericks.
they almost willed that championship because their starting power forward was Chucky Brown. I mean, think about that. I think Chucky Brown was their starting power forward.
It's Carl Landry.
Yeah, they had to trade Otis Thorpe in order to get Clyde Drexler and bring him in. And they had to trade, I guess, Maxwell, or was Maxwell cut, or was he on that roster? I forget. But anyway, yeah. So I it's just kind of disappointing. I said that you had a franchise that had that much talent under the same roof at the same time, and this is how it ends.
Are the 2016 Golden State Warriors like the 1998 Yankees? In the sense, they had this magical group of players who nobody 100% would have picked, over other people. And it was just this magical group of players, from trades to
Signing,
drafting to signing to coaching. Steve Kerr was a failed executive. Joe Torre, no one really, what was it, Clueless Joe when he was named. And they just had a group nobody even had ridiculous. Now, Steph Curry has ridiculous numbers, but he's sort of Jeter-esque a little bit from that team. And then what happened? They won the most games as well, they didn't get the most. They were up there.
Mm-hmm.
And then what happened is they started bringing in names. The next year, Roger Clemens came. Then you eventually had Jason Giambi. You had like weird guys like Raul Mondesi, who the unfortunate part of Golden State, they had a beautiful basketball team, and they're going to start having to bring in Raul Mondesis now on the back end of their career. Gary Sheffield, Alex Rodriguez. I hope Alex Rodriguez is not like Kevin Durant, because everyone who didn't want Alex Rodriguez, right? And it just keeps accumulating names and players, and the return is not there as it was when you just had this magical group. Now, of course, they won 2 more after the 98, but they were still the core of that team pretty much through 2001. Tony Womack, like all these players.
For me, not so much the Clemens signing, but when they signed Giambi, for me, that was when the Yankees made the wrong turn. Anymore. That wasn't, because then they could have had an all farm system infield, with Nick Johnson, Soriano, Jeter, and
Tino. Tino wasn't
but I was thinking of
Nick Johnson.
Nick Johnson at first, Nick Johnson at first, Soriano at second, Jeter short, and then I can't believe I'm going to say this, but Drew Henson at third. I thought Drew Henson was going to be their third baseman, but then when they signed Giambi, then they just threw good money at it after bad, because then they went after A-Rod, and then it didn't. So for me, that was I agree with you.
I hope that they have their core 4 here. It's amazing. But the magic on the outskirts, the intangibles of what the team had, was what made them so beautifully watchable too. And they're still going to be watchable, but I'm going to be really scared if there's a moment where the 5th or 6th guy is dependent on to hit the shot to win something. And you're looking at like 42-year-old Ray Allen.
Well, yeah, that may be Ray Allen.
Someone even like Zaza Pachulia. Like I like, Zaza's fine, but I sort of don't like that he's on this team. It's like, it kind of sullies it. Why don't we quickly go through, because anybody on film can see that the baby, or can see me looking at this monitor, which is my son who's starting to roll, but that usually means you got some time. If he starts to stand, we'll have to cut this, but I'll quickly go through the teams, and we'll say watchable and why we want to watch it. We'll go in alphabetical order. I got the Roto World depth chart, which is up to date, which is great. So we have the Atlanta Hawks. I'm really excited, honestly, to see Dwight Howard back in the East, and just to see what the heck happens there. I It would be fun.
I'd like to watch them too, just because it's kind of like with the Nets. They're taking that one big man and putting a lot of perimeter guys around it.
Which is what happened in Orlando.
Yeah, they drafted Prince, they drafted Bembry, they brought Bazemore back. They've still got Schroeder on the perimeter.
They got either Korver. They're going to give Schroeder the keys.
Yes.
Which is interesting. Baby Rondo.
So it's going to be interesting to see how they play around Horford. So I'm looking forward to seeing them play.
Chris Humphries is 4th on the depth chart there still. Amazing.
I think he's a free agent, isn't he?
Oh, is it? All right. Well, he was on here for whatever reason.
Well, that was the last place he played. So
right. That's true. And Paul Millsap's still hanging on.
Yeah.
He's the most unloved player in the NBA. Everyone wants him, but then they're like,
He's a great defensive player. I don't know why they...
and talk about a guy who's been so great, who's really not made any money. I mean, by NBA standards.
Well, he's going to make a lot of money next year. He's in the last year of his contract. So.
Will he be too old, though? Isn't he going to be like 33 at that point?
Well, I guess it depends on how he plays this year.
Yeah. The Nets we talked about, they are quite watchable, to be honest.
Especially comparing to last year, they're definitely watchable. Yeah.
How about the Sean Kilpatrick? Everyone was like killing that signing sort of because it was like, kind of a D-League guy. He made like nothing, right? I mean, he made like barely $1 million a year, I think, for like.
Yeah, he's a solid role player. I mean, he's a solid guy to come off the bench.
But yeah, it'll be fun to see Brooke with these group, and there's gonna be energy. It's gonna be worth watching them. The Celtics we hit on. If they don't do something, they're only a little more watchable than they were. I never really enjoyed watching them. It's another one of those things where when you know there's a ceiling on the team, it's hard for me to get too into any one game watching them unless they're playing a top team in Boston because they'll give them a good run. But I remember like 2 years ago, the one time I really enjoyed watching Boston was on a Sunday. And Golden State was there on a Sunday afternoon game, and Golden State was down by like 25. And I'm gonna watch this because Golden State's gonna win.
And went to overtime.
And I think they won, right?
Yeah, they did. Golden State won in overtime, and I think they played the Nets the next night, and actually the Nets beat them. So
yeah. Didn't the Nets beat them twice 2 years ago?
They didn't beat them twice. They beat them once last year. So they've split the last 2 years.
Did they beat them? They beat them. They were one of the teams who beat them this year?
No. I'm thinking of I'm thinking of 2 years ago and 3 years ago. Last year, no, they lost them both times. But I mean, last year they lost almost everybody. I'm thinking of the 2014-15 version of the Nets, and then the year before that.
Jared Jack should probably go back to Golden State.
Yeah, I think so. That would probably make sense. And he and Curry get along really well.
Yeah, and he was a good guy in practice, I think, pushing Curry.
Yeah.
Charlotte is they're sort of the same team, just they're overpaying their guys for another good player development team, by the way.
Yeah, I wouldn't say
Clifford.
I wouldn't say they're watchable.
They're not really watchable. Oof. That's the type of team that get to the playoffs and maybe they start to get a little bit, but Marvin Williams is making a lot of money. Nicholas Batum made a ton. They built up these players on the year, their free agent year, and then they paid them.
Yeah. And they lost Lynn, they lost Al Jefferson, so I mean, they lost Courtney Lee. So I mean, maybe Kid Gilchrist gives them something. By the way,
I mean, when Larry Bird gets rid of Frank Vogel because he wants to play up tempo, and then he hires Nate McMillan and signs Al Jefferson.
He feels like another opportunistic Chicago type deal.
That doesn't make sense to me. That's
although on the whole, I like what Indiana did in the offseason. I mean, they traded George Hill in the 20th pick and got Thaddeus
for what they
have.
For what they were.
But for Larry Bird to stand up there, we want to play more up tempo. We're going to bring in Nate McMillan.
Their best case is to be Charlotte this year. Charlotte from last year to be like Charlotte this year, you know?
Well, I think Indy can be really good just because they've got Paul George, who's one of the best players in the league.
That's exactly
so, I mean,
right.
if you have a superstar, it's like if you surround him with the right guys, if these are the right guys.
It's sort of a shame they can't do better, though, because it's another one of these things. Are they going to look back and see something lost when Paul George is going to leave at some point because they're not able to bring in. Like they got a draft and they had that good team who gave Miami a run, but they're sort of in a spot where they're running out on. It's another small market where they're running out on the players' prime years with them.
Well, maybe they should bring Reggie Miller into the meeting when it comes time for the free agents. So.
Oh yeah, that's how. That's what he can hit on. Chicago, we've hit on. Wow. Oh my God. I think weirdly Doug McDermott could play a big role. He was such a failure, but then he had a great run after the All-Star break where he was like aggressive and he's hitting shots. Yeah. Well, he could be good as these guys are going to take a lot of space with them.
Chicago is Sacramento East.
Yes, exactly right.
Yeah.
They really are. Oof, God. the Dwayne Wade thing is just gonna. I know it's gonna be sad. And poor Jimmy Butler. They're like, it's your team. We're getting rid of Rose. Now we're bringing in two guys who
I know,
now move you
one-
third on the depth chart.
They
Is
won-
Rondo on a 1-year deal again too?
He is. They won championships.
Oh, you know the messed up thing with Rondo though? I think if he's in an okay place, he's like Kid in the sense that Kid might have not been a great guy, but his superpower was being unselfish on the court. Rondo does get he still had an amazing amount of assists last year.
Yeah.
He's like the Jeff George of basketball. Like he'll get you, however many yards throwing, and he'll get his numbers. He still can't really shoot, but I had no interest in watching Chicago the last few years, none whatsoever. I could not put the game on. And here you don't even need the package because you guys probably get WGN or whatever.
Yeah.
So I had no interest. I sort of have an interest in watching them, even if it's to see the train crash.
I won't watch them post December.
That's true. Yeah, that's exactly right. Cleveland, I had no interest in watching them last season. I had so much trouble watching them unless they're playing someone good.
Well, I think they're watchable now because they're defending champs. So.
To a degree, to me that might make them.
I'll tune in May.
Yeah, that might make them more unwatchable to me that they actually won it because I saw that they didn't really care about the regular season and then were able to turn it on. It will be interesting to see what happens with Kevin Love though, because he showed the duality of who he is as a player in that finals.
Well, it was the reverse of Harrison Barnes. Had Golden State won, Kevin Love's probably gone. They trade him away, and Golden State keeps Harrison Barnes. And because the other team won, they keep Kevin Love, and Harrison Barnes is gone. So
I think Kevin Love is actually more valuable to Cleveland in a series against this current version of Golden State.
Exactly.
Than more so than the last one.
They moved their team into his strengths.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Tristan Thompson, the one thing I will say, that guy plays. I mean, he got way overpaid. Maybe he didn't in this new world.
Not today.
But he showed up. And I mean, whether it was because Draymond lost momentum by being out and what he did, that guy, he's got he's got something about him that doesn't back down.
Well, I think the asset that he showed was that he's able to guard guards on the perimeter. He was able to.
So did Kevin Love.
They were.
Just kidding.
Well, for one play. One play.
He did.
What if Curry wasn't? What if Curry was injured? Like enough that it affected that he was like 85% of himself. That's going to be interesting. We'll see that right away next year. That'll be fun to watch. But yeah, they almost. It's amazing they won. I mean, it's the only thing that kept the glue together on that thing. I mean, it's wow. And then, God, Golden State's going to look back for Richard Jefferson to be playing a major role on that team, and for them just with gum and mud and LeBron just being unbelievable. So it doesn't matter. I mean, they don't have to win again. Dallas is actually interesting to me this year because Andrew Bogut, I want to see how he plays with this team. Him and Dirk together could be like a fun. What was that team when Sabonis, when he was old and he was on the Portland, and he was just really fun passing, and they were sort of post championship, but they were watchable.
Yeah, I'm interested in the fact that Wesley Matthews and Harrison Barnes are playing on the same team.
Yeah.
I'm interested.
It'll be fun to see Harrison Barnes. It could go bad too. It could be fun in both ways.
I don't know if it's complementary or duplicative. That's why I want to see how that works.
They're a nice trade chip team. They're like how the Yankees have the 3 closers on their team. They're out of it. They could go, all right, who wants one of these guys who are on the new max contracts? Oh, Wesley Matthews deal looks really good going forward. The Denver, Larry Brown retired yesterday. He was supposed to get Moutier. I don't know.
Denver's weird because they're actually like 2 deep at every position.
Yeah. Small forward, they're like 6 deep. Wait, when did Mike Miller end up on Denver?
He was there last year.
Was he?
He just didn't really play much. Yeah.
They just don't really have an identity.
Yeah.
But it's a case where the whole is less than the sum of the parts.
Who did they draft?
Jamal Murray.
Oh, did they?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, there he is. Yeah. That doesn't even put them over any kind of. I mean, he's another Canadian guy, isn't he? Isn't Jamal Murray from? Yeah, Canada man, kicking it out of the. Well, kicking it probably doesn't help. Detroit, was that their ceiling last year?
No, I think they get better, and I think the Ish Smith pickup was a good pickup. I mean, they're paying him almost nothing.
Ish is the good pickup every year now,
Yeah.
right?
But I mean, he's only making $6 million. So I mean,
Yeah.
it's like in this new salary cap. I mean, to back up Reggie Jackson, and they're also really young too. So
They got Tarzuski. Was that their pick? Who was their big? Oh yeah, because
No,
they weren't in the.
no, they got Henry Allenson.
Oh, okay.
They took him at 18, who I think is actually gonna be a nice player. He's looked pretty good in summer league so far.
There are some draft picks who the year they're drafted, even when you're looking at them, you're like, oh, they've been in the league for like 3 years. You know, Golden State, we talked about. I just want to see where the depth comes in. So they got Damian. Who did they draft? They got Damian. Oh, they got Kevin Looney. They like him, right?
Well, they drafted him
last year.
Yeah, the year
That's
before.
another
Yeah,
one of these things.
and he had a lot of injury problems, so he never really factored into the mix there.
Was Damian Jones who they?
Yeah, they drafted him this year.
And he was from Vanderbilt, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Houston. Wow.
Notice we haven't mentioned Houston at all.
No, they got Ryan Anderson.
And Eric Gordon.
They're gonna they got Eric Gordon. Wow. You know the funny thing with Eric Gordon, I remember when he signed his last restricted deal with New Orleans, and he went to Phoenix, and he was like, "This is where I want to go. I don't want to play in New Orleans.
Yeah.
Please don't cut." I always think it's like fascinating when someone goes to that level, and then the years later when they come back open, like they don't even care about going to that team that they loved like 3 years ago.
I think
strange.
The only thing interesting for me about Houston is that Morey was so in love with getting Ryan Anderson to complement Dwight Howard.
Mhm.
He was always after Anderson, and now he still went after Anderson, even though Howard's gone.
How about this for breaking
does it
news?
make sense?
Rockets and four-time All-Star James Harden agreed a 4-year, $118 million renegotiation. Wow. I really do like Harden. I think you have to be a great GM, though, to build the right team around him. I mean, I don't know what that team is. Certainly wasn't Dwight.
Well, maybe they think Capella is going to give them what they
People
want.
love Capella.
Yeah,
Basketball people love Capella.
Yeah,
And I'm like, I watch and I go, okay, yeah. I guess he's one of those tape guys.
yeah.
Like the people who like Zach Lowe's, they go and they watch like all the tape and go backwards. You're not a tape guy, are you?
No.
Okay, good. Tim is, but yeah, they're I like Ryan Anderson. I don't like him on this team.
Nor do I.
Man.
Well, because he doesn't play defense and Harden doesn't play defense. So
Oh dear. Yeah, it's really not going to be that different than New Orleans in some ways. And man, getting Mike D'Antoni, how weird is that? Oof. As we move from that coach, we talked about Indiana. They're going to be much improved, but they're probably like a ceiling 3 or 4 seed.
yeah, but 3 or 4 seeds still pretty good.
Is that 48 wins or is that 52 wins?
I'll split the difference and say 50.
Okay. See, I think you have to get to 50. We've talked about that. You have to be considered. Like, you notice how the Eastern Conference, the whole thing was 48 wins. Like when they got that, ugh, it makes me sick. If it's like such a failed season, I hate the 4. Just get to 50. The Clippers, not much to talk about. They didn't do anything, but that's probably a good thing.
Well, they picked up Maurice Spates. So
They did. That's a good move, actually. I like Maurice Spates. And they got Diamond Stone, who has one of the great names.
Yes.
The Clippers, for me, are the 2003-2004 Sacramento Kings.
Yeah, that's possible. But the good thing for the Clippers, when we talk about in a season and a team is as dominant as like Golden State was, and people are going, well, I'm talking to all these GMs and they're like, we don't even know what to do. But then again, we're always one injury from something happening or something. Like the off-season version of one injury is a free agent moving, because all of a sudden it's halfway possible they're the second best team in the West now.
Yeah, them in San Antonio.
But San
2 and 3.
Antonio, like Tim, if he retires, which it sounded like he was, I don't know if it officially happened. I think that it's like when the Yankees, even though Mariano Rivera was like 43, when he retired, the entire complexion of their team changed. Even when they bring in the greatest closers now, there's something about like when Brodeur was with the Devils, when he was old, there's something about that presence just being there that makes the group feel different. And I think when Tim leaves, all of a sudden your team is run by LaMarcus Aldridge, and like Kawhi's great, but he's quiet.
Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe his kind of ceiling is where it is, great two-way ceiling, but we talked about that. They could drop off a bit now. And I there's a part of me when Duncan's gone that prefers Los Angeles to San Antonio on the roster. age taken into consideration, who the players are, the mix of the players. Isn't Chris Paul on a free agent year now too?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And there's something about that team that plays Golden State well too. Chris Paul can play well against Steph, and their roster is going to be big against Golden
They
State.
just have to stay healthy and hope Blake Griffin doesn't punch any trainers. I
That's
guess.
right. That's right. But there is a positive to all the guys getting injured. They didn't have a run through the playoffs. Like
Yeah,
they're going
right.
to be fresh.
Yeah.
I don't know. I have a weird feeling they're going to be really, really good and formidable, and they might finally have a big win against Golden State. It felt like Golden State always just toyed with them and beat them. But again, I think that's the type of team where Golden State lost what made them great against a team like that. The Lakers are they're really never watchable. Although D'Angelo Russell showed a little bit. So if he could take a step forward, how about having Jose Calderon and Marcelo Huertas, the same team? That's fun. Man, Dang.
Yeah, Luol Deng and
Mozgov.
Mozgov. Yeah.
The other thing I was thinking of, why didn't Roy Hibbert wait a second and see if he could go to Golden State? I think Roy Hibbert would have been very good on Golden State in terms of how much money they have to give and what he can do when you don't ask him to do too much. He was a really good defender and rebounder with Indiana those years. The minute you ask him to do too much or put him out of a comfort zone, he's terrible. But I feel like on that team, he could have been much better than Festus Ezeli. I think we lost it because we saw what happened, but I think he's one of those, like, again, when we talk about not the culture changers, I think he's all about confidence. Like, he has no confidence, but if you breathe it into him somehow, I mean, look how all of a sudden everyone's like, Maurice Spates, man. He's like, he's fantastic. He became like the voice for Golden State. Every game he's in the hallway, post game, he's in the hallway talking to the media. And I think there's something about when you're like the eighth option, all of a sudden confidence can come to you. And when it's like, you are our guy, you're going to be down there, do the whole thing, the Sports Illustrated article about the verticality and how he was like, they taught him how to just jump straight up. And it's like, oh, that's something we're talking about.
There's less interest paid to him in Charlotte, so maybe he can just sort of blend into
New Orleans, right? Isn't that where he signed?
Hibbert? I believe he went to Charlotte, didn't he?
I thought it was...
I can't break this tie.
Oh, you're right. Charlotte. I get messed up between the two.
Oh, yeah, but they
worlds.
changed names, yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. Oh, I don't even like... That's weird. I felt like that would have been the kind of... Because he didn't even take that much money.
Yeah,
he took like a $5 million.
Yeah, he's basically replacing Al Jefferson. So.
Yeah. Ooh, he'll probably do well there, though.
Yeah, 1 year, $5 million.
Yeah, he'll probably do well there. We talked about Houston, Indiana, LA, Memphis, Tim.
Memphis. I think Memphis is going to be in the Western Conference Finals next year. I say that every year, but I believe it this year.
I think they're watchable.
And Vince is still there. Vince is the guy I thought should have championship chased with
people go to Memphis, they like it.
Yeah, but I think it speaks to his personality. He likes it a little too much. It's like assisted living home, Sorry. Yeah, they're probably going to be quite good, though. I mean, Parsons will be a decent small forward.
If he's healthy.
Everyone, if they're healthy, right? Because they're another one of those teams, when you're older, when you're injured, and you miss a lot of time, like their main players did, that can either be a positive, like I'm trying to say with the Clippers, where you're rested, but also an injury can steal everything from you, too. That's always a freaky thing when a guy comes back from an injury and they're not even like, a piece of what they were before. Memphis has that ability to go that way too. The Heat, they need to do some stuff to be kind of watchable.
They're going to be young, but I don't know how watchable they are. I mean, it'll be
it's Whiteside on a max deal too.
Their starters are probably Dragic, Josh Richardson, Justice Winslow, Bosch if he's healthy, and then Whiteside. So I mean, it's basically 3 really young guys in Whiteside, Winslow, and Richardson.
Whiteside on a max deal is going to be real fun to watch.
Yeah,
with fewer veterans in the locker room.
Yeah,
remember he's a businessman, and we know what happens to businessmen who sign max deals. Carmelo, remember? I'm a businessman with my cigar and my 3-piece suit.
Yeah, and he was reportedly difficult enough in that locker room when you had Dwayne Wade policing it, when you had Luol Deng there.
That was another point I wanted to make about Dwayne Wade. I had a problem with the fact that he was so enamored with getting that deal that puts him above everyone that it's like, Miami, take care, dispatch all these guys who were my teammates, get them out of here so you could get my money. Like that to me is just, it's horrendous. Like you're sitting there going, wait, that guy was my teammate and he's being offered 20 million. And he's like, no, get off with Josh McRoberts' hair. I miss Josh McRoberts' hair, but that was something that was very, it's just not, Dwayne Wade was never that guy. And now all of a sudden he's that guy. Minnesota is going to be really awesome to watch.
Mm-hmm. Chris Dunn looked great last night. He scored 27 points in summer league. So
they're going to be so fun to watch. The fear though, is it possible that because everyone was ready to watch New Orleans last year, there's always that worry. Like you can always go backwards. I don't think this team will because Tibbs gets you 47 wins by himself. And the
he does
athletes he has. Oof.
But the key is getting to 50.
Got to get to 50. Well, they won't make the playoffs. If
New Orleans was interesting only because of Anthony Davis, whereas you could argue Memphis is interesting because of Chris Dunn, because of Wiggins, because of
they have a portfolio of a lot of stocks you're watching.
Towns,
they do.
Which is
really, Towns being the main one.
And Towns will make a massive step forward this year, even from where he was.
And he was great last year.
Yeah, he's going to be like, whoa. I mean, he's going to be fantastic to watch. That's going to be a lot of fun. And Brandon Rush went there. So maybe he'll take the championship spirit of Golden State with him. How about the 1-8 matchup next year's playoffs, Minnesota against Golden State? Because they have the underbelly of giving a lot of problems to that team. And if Chris Dunn, I assume he's going to be starting, right? Ricky Rubio's still there.
I think they want to trade Rubio.
Yeah. Chris Dunn D'ing Steph Curry, when all he has to do is D. Who the heck is guarding Towns?
We'll finally see what Wiggins looks like on the perimeter against Golden State.
Wiggins should be able to defend that way. He's pretty good one-on-one. He's not. He's going to be great next year because Thibodeau's not going to let him not be a great defender. So that'll be fun. Zach LaVine is an athlete. Hopefully, if that happens, that could be the come to Jesus moment for Golden State, where they're like, we built this mammoth team, and they could be in it for a tough one. Milwaukee is Milwaukee. Jabari Parker, I saw him backing up.
I actually am interested to watch them because of how long they are, and they just added Thon Maker, who's super long as well. And I didn't just say that to bring his name. I
can't wait till Thon Maker guards Diamond Stone.
But it's like
Stone Maker.
His length with Antetokounmpo's length, with Parker's length, with Michael Carter Williams' length, with Henson's length.
And they got Giannis as the point guard in the depth chart. Woo! Let's see how long that. The problem with Kidd is he falls out of love. He's like the new Larry Brown. He falls out of love with point guards, in love and out of love really quickly. So that's going to be a.
Well, they have Dellavedova, so.
Yeah, they're all set there. God, his contract doesn't even look that crazy at this point. And they got Greg Monroe. There you go. Yeah, Milwaukee was another team who I was like, you know what? You're never going to get anything. Get Russell Westbrook here for 1 year and just see what happens. Imagine Russell and Giannis together. The electricity would just be unbelievable. And I feel like they don't love Jabari Parker. I bet you OKC really likes him. And he's like an OKC type of guy. He's like a really he's Mormon, which is interesting to me. How did that happen? No races. It's just one of those weird growing up in Chicago. How do you become?
They knock on a lot of doors.
That's true.
On a lot of doors.
He's very eager and earnest. That's why he'll be good on OKC. New Orleans, man, they got a lot to do
Yeah, they have a lot of nice players, but nothing that really aside from Anthony Davis, that really jumps out at you.
I mean, I'm interested to see how Buddy Hield does.
Didn't they? Oh yeah, Buddy will be fun. Didn't they Solomon Hill is third on the depth chart?
Yeah, they gave
Tyreek did he leave? No, he's still
there.
Solomon Hill got like 40 million, right?
I think it was 4 years, 52.
Oh my God.
I know.
Oh, the Knicks we talked about. My thing with the Knicks, if all of these players coming in allow Kristaps Porzingis to be their best player, they're going to be really good. I think it needs to be obvious, even in flashes, that he's their best player next year. And these other players have to be willing to allow that to happen. But Derrick Rose on a contract year, I mean, if he plays, that's going to be fun. I think we talked about Brandon Jennings has the chance to be like Sean Livingston's 1 year with the Nets, where he really rehabilitates himself into a longer term, bigger contract next year with somebody else.
And they're paying him almost nothing. So
yeah, for 1 year, $5 million, right? Carmelo Anthony finally gets to play with the Bulls, which is a positive.
I really like the Courtney Lee pickup. I think he's a good 3-and-D guy. They kept Lance Thomas. So, I mean, I think
hopefully he has a chance to take the stain off of his record. That was the 12-win. Or how many wins did the Nets get that year? You were covering them, weren't you?
When they went 12-70?
12, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for Courtney Lee.
You were covering them, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that was my first year. Oh, yeah.
Well, so actually the fact that it was your first year probably made it not as terrible, right? Like, were the other beat writers just like, kill me?
Yeah, they were miserable. Like Fred Kerber, like he was in rare form during that year. So
he just tweets anything too.
Yeah.
I love Fred.
Yeah, so do I.
Like, they didn't even cover the team. No one even put their stories like in articles, right?
No, they covered.
Because they were covering the anti-story, right?
Yeah.
Of beating the record. We talked about OKC. I still think they're going to be really good. God, Ilyasova. Remember when the Nets like loved Ilyasova?
Yeah, I think that he was a kid guy. Like he loved Ilyasova.
Cantor and Ilyasova.
Yeah.
Oh God. Yeah, they're Nazi Muhammad's still there. He's like the
He's hanging on.
He's like the Juwan Howard of the NBA at this point. Orlando, they gave a lot of money to Fournier. I guess he was worth it.
He's young too. He's like 23. So.
Oh, they give a ton of money to Bismack Biyombo, who, by the way, was drafted ahead of Klay Thompson that year.
Yeah.
Oof.
I had breakfast with him once.
Did you?
I did.
Why? Was he fighting malaria?
Yeah, it was actually for a group called the what's it called? I can't think of the name of it anymore. But yeah,
Did it have to do with Nets?
No, it had to do with it was global health overall. It's the oh no, actually it was about coffee, growing coffee, and
Was he a nice guy?
Very nice guy. I mean, when it wasn't just the two of us having breakfast, there were maybe like 30 people.
He's not even first on their depth chart. And he got all that money.
Yeah, they have Vucevic still probably first on the depth chart, right?
Both of it are, yeah. Vucevic is, yeah. It will be, see what Serge can do in
a new place.
In a new place in a contract year, right? Philly is totally watchable this year.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't watch them because my internet feed thinks I'm in the Philly market because my cable provider is in the Lehigh Valley. So when I try to put it on, it goes, you're blacked out. And I'm like, I've been fine with that for years, but now I'm sort of like, well, I can't even watch them. I wonder if they'll be on any national TV at all this year. I think probably because of Simmons.
They'll probably be on NBA TV a couple times.
And I don't get that. My cable provider doesn't have a deal with that. But yeah, Simmons has looked good.
Yeah,
I think I think his confidence, and many people think it's like too carefree. I just think it's because he's that good. Like, he is scary, scary good. And I think you can always teach a shot. If he's willing to work at it. LeBron learned a shot for a minute. I mean, it left him and then came back in little spurts. But he didn't have to shoot at LSU. He was able to play center. Like, you can always learn to shoot. You can't learn to do the other things he does. And they're going to be really, really fun to watch. Jared Bayless is always on the teams who are on the up. You ever notice that? He always shows up when you're on the up, and then it's like you move him. So maybe they should have like the Jared meter or the Bayless meter. Yeah, they signed Gerald Henderson too.
Yeah, those are good pickups. I mean, they're like veteran depth basically.
Yeah, and Okafor and Embiid might play, right?
Yeah,
this year
he's supposed to. That's the plan.
They're going to be fun if he can play, and then they're going to bring in Saric, I think, this year possibly. Yeah, they're very watchable.
He's supposed to be here.
And then we're coming to the end here. So Phoenix, Devin Booker, it'll be interesting to see what he does next. They re-signed Jared Dudley. Tyson Chandler's still hanging out there.
I don't know that watchable.
Mm-mm.
No, they're not. Leandro, yeah, we talked about him. Portland is still Portland, although they have a center now. It gives Ezeli a chance to. It gives him a chance to be a starter in a quieter spot.
Well, I think that backcourt makes them watchable. So they have some depth now. So
I have a weird feeling Evan Turner will be good for them.
I think he's gonna be good for him too, because I think they brought him in for his defense. So.
I almost wonder though, is he the new Jeff Green? He was like a top pick, and he just was never what he was in college.
Jeff Green, who ironically went to Orlando.
He did.
On a 1-year deal, right?
Yeah.
The Spurs are still the Spurs. If Duncan's gone, though, they could brought in Gasol. Like, that was a weird move. I guess you got to take him. He's part of your like culture-ish. But I thought culture was always an important part of him. Actual culture. Is there a symphony in San Antonio? There must be, right? All the oil money.
I've never been.
I've been
I've been there.
I've been to Fort Worth, but not to San Antonio. So
San Antonio is so small town. Oh my God. Sacramento.
Oof.
watchable in that it's like
Train wreck.
train wreck. Yeah.
Yeah, they got who did they draft? Isaiah Cousins? Was that their first?
No, they drafted that Greek guy 13th, who was supposed to go in the
Yes,
second round.
the
He was
center.
he was projected to go like late first, early second round, and they took him at 13.
You know who I like they drafted? I like that guy Malachi
I do too.
Richards or Malachi. It's Malachi,
It's
right?
Malachi. Yeah.
He was good. I like that he was good in the tournament.
Yeah.
Like he really showed up. I think he'll be a good player. It's such a Sacramento pick though. Toronto is just
The same.
they're
Yeah.
the same. They're like those old Detroit Pistons teams before they got Rashid. You know, they're just kind of there. DeRozan, even like when everyone was like, oh, his people say he wants to go to LA, like it almost worries me that he didn't go seemingly take meetings. He was just like, no, I'm good here. I'll just kind of hang here. Utah got George Hill.
And Joe Johnson.
And they get Exum. They get Exum back.
That's true.
Yeah, that's big.
The Joe Johnson move was just weird. Like he couldn't get he should have waited till the Dwayne Wade thing happened. Like why was he in such a hurry to
You
take
should have gone to Cleveland in the first
I
place.
know. Why was he in such a hurry to take
Hmm.
12 million from or 24 million over 2 years from Utah? Like Joe doesn't care. He's just gonna go live in Salt Lake City for a couple of years.
He's not going to start there, so
Yeah, it's so weird. You know, you get Joe Johnson when he's like 36. Ugh, yeah, they're just almost not a lot of interest there. They never took the next step. And then Washington, speaking of a team like that, and Nene signed with he was on Houston.
He wasn't Houston.
yeah.
Oh, the NBA in the have-nots, it's hard. The watchables are not that exciting. Is there anything we missed?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
All right. Well, we successfully made it through a Google Hangout somehow and through a podcast. So thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.